Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to the Ready to Bloom podcast, which features interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, without further ado, I'll hand you over to your host, Holly Wharton.
Hello and welcome to the Ready to Bloom podcast, episode 113. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm here with today's special guest, Tash Mitch. Tash is a creative, a life and business coach, an energy alchemist, and a writer. She works with women to help them align to their divinity, their intuition, and their life and business purpose. Welcome, Tash.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here today. So why don't you just start out by telling us a little bit about your background and your business journey and how you got to where you are today with your business?
Well, basically, I started off studying business and finance and ended up going into media advertising for the BBC, first of all, and then later on for Music Week magazine. But there was always that pull for me to actually get into energy work. And the pull was really that basically, I think, there's always been that sense of magic in terms of the human existence, really, and a sense of like there's more than just meets the eye, there's more than just the 3D sort of existence that we have. And so exploring that has always been given me a sense of excitement, and it's something that's always drawn me. So I started off doing Reiki while I was still working in advertising, and then ended up going into body work. And the reason why I went into bodywork is because I wanted to explore energy work, but at the time, people's understanding of energy wasn't there as much, and so it felt really useful to go into something that people could come to and understand and really grasp as a modality, and then introduce them to the energy work element of it. And I did that for a while. But the energy work then started to take a different turn in the sense of people were coming for body work, and I was finding that I was coaching them as well. And then people started coming more for the coaching than for the body work. And then I started sort of, exploring that a bit more and opening myself up to learn, etc., with that. And that's basically where the progression has come to now, where actually merging energy work and coaching work together, and really bringing that solid element of the business side of things that I learned from media advertising into it as well.
So it sounds like your business has had a really natural evolution.
It always has been that way for me, because for me, there's always been a sense of following my own resonance. And sometimes following your own resonance can be quite scary because it's, it isn't always logical,
Mm-hmm.
and it isn't always safe. Like, it's not always like the comfortable path to follow, in the sense of like you can feel yourself moving in a direction, but it doesn't necessarily you have to put a lot of work in, and you have to put a lot of time and energy into it. And in order to stay the course, you really have to be quite determined, in the beginning stages. And so definitely there was challenges in the beginning of getting into the bodywork element of it. But because I was so passionate, and because basically what I was doing was aligned to me and who I am and what I wanted to express into the world, it didn't seem so challenging. It was challenging, but it basically there was enough excitement and enough energy behind it that there weren't any challenges I couldn't really surpass with it. And that's where the success element started coming in, really, is basically staying the course and just continuously expanding from there.
Definitely. So did you experience any fears or blocks coming up as you built your business and as you went through these changes?
There's always a sort of fear of, am I doing the right thing? And in the beginning stages, when you are at that point where you aren't as successful yet, things are growing, but they might be growing, at a slower rate than you thought they would, or basically you might have went forward one step and then taken two steps back, or something that you actually thought was a given, you find out that, there's been disappointment and that's not going to go through. All of those things are hard work, and all of those things are quite challenging, and all of those things are things that you need to surmount and get through especially in the beginning stages, but I don't think that ever changes, you know. I think basically as you go forward, your foundation is laid, and so you're able to be a lot more comfortable in the arena that you're in. But there's always that element of expansion, and there's always that element of what next, and that is always changing things as well. So there is always that element of not entirely 100% comfortable when you're running a business. You know, yeah. Basically, that's the long and the short of it. And what makes it not so uncomfortable is the fact that, you know, you love what you do and you're in it and you're 100% going for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you keep getting more experience, it seems to be easier to tackle the things that come up.
Absolutely, and this is what I was saying before about basically at the beginning stages when you're defining, and also the definition is always changing, but definitely in the beginning stages. Everyone, I think, who starts a business is in that stage of defining who they are, why they're doing, what they're doing, who their audience is, where the business is going, all of that kind of thing. And that's always kind of like a constant redefining until you get it where you feel like you're completely aligned with that path. And in the midst of that, you know, redefining stage, there's a lot that can be distracting where you're like, have I actually done the right thing here? You know, there's far easier ways of going forward. I mean, I could actually just go back to 9 to 5 or so. Sometimes, like every now and again, the whole 9 to 5 scenario looks actually quite attractive in the midst of it all. And then you remember why you're doing it, and you remember, you know, what it's all for, and you find that extra burst of energy to move forward again.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I was listening to Amy Porterfield's podcast a couple weeks ago, and she had Natalie Lucier on there. And she was talking about how it's like a spiral staircase because you know you're going around in circles, but you're going circles and you're going up to new levels each time. So sometimes it can feel like you've come across the same thing, but it's kind of a similar thing, but at a different level.
Well, you're continuously expanding. You're continuously expanding. And when I actually think of the person that I was when I first started, for example, on the road with bodywork, and then the person that I was when I first started on the road with coaching, completely different. Same person, and basically the resonance and what's drawing me has changed, but not hugely. But in terms of the experience, in terms of what I've learned, in terms of how I've defined myself, and in terms of the why and the solidness of that why, that is always continuously expanding you forward. So even though the challenge might look exactly the same like it did the last time, you're a different person in the midst of it, definitely.
Yeah, for me, it's been a lot about kind of peeling off the layers and just getting more to the core of myself.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of business, really, because once you sign up to run your own business, you sign up for that. You sign up for basically expansion. And you sign up for constant expansion because you are continuously actually meeting your own boundaries, and you're continuously meeting the edges of yourself. And in order for the business to go on, or for the business to move forward or whatever, you yourself have to move past those boundaries and those edges, you know. So it's and you know that makes it challenging. It's not always pretty, but on the other side of the coin, it's it's a bit like that whole sort of, you know, caterpillar butterfly scenario. It's quite beautiful in terms of the expansion element.
Definitely. So, Tash, you work a lot with women around how to help them align to exactly what they want, how to align to their heart and to their resonance. Can you tell us a little bit about what your top tips are for that? Because I know when I started out, I had all those layers on me, and I was just beginning to peel off and to kind of even get to know who I was. And it was so hard for me to align to what I wanted because I was still so outside of myself, kind of. So what are your top tips on how to help people align to their heart and what they want?
Well, my major tip is that basically it's your resonance that counts. It's what's inside of you that counts. And to a large extent, we live in a society that, you know, is teaching us to reach outwards in a lot of ways, you know, to kind of look for people who are doing certain things and modeling them and all of that kind of thing, which is great to find mentors, don't get me wrong. But basically, if that mentor isn't exactly your resonance, then sort of mirroring and modeling them will never feel right to you. So you always have to come back to the fact that you have the answers within your own self. And I think basically once you've actually got that, then you'll find people that will actually be able, because for me, I think the whole thing, so when you're talking about tips, the whole thing is that you need to get into your own subconscious mind to a large degree. And you need to be able to find ways, metaphors, people, life experiences of actually drawing out your subconscious mind for you so you can actually expand forward. And really understanding that that's what you're doing, and understanding that really you know, this is your life, this is your path, and it's about you aligning to that path and moving forward one step at a time. I think it's basically the biggest tip of it all, because once you really align with that you have the answers. And you might seek advice from different places. You might come to different information. You might actually learn about things. You might go to workshops and expand. But ultimately, you're always going to come back to this is your path and your alignment. And really to actually get that really solidly in the mind, just at the beginning stages of everything, is so useful.
And I think that can also be really challenging because especially to people who are new to business, and as you said, there are all these business mentors out there, and a lot of them have quite big personalities online. And it can be so easy to get sidetracked and say, oh, well, they're the guru, they know what's right. And try to follow them and their model when it's not really right for you.
Which is why the why of what you're doing is so important. You know, basically, that's where your resonance really emanates from, is why are you doing this? You know, what's your draw to this? Why are you feeling the pull in that direction? Because once you've actually got that element of this is why I'm doing it, then you can actually look to different mentors to actually give you advice and to show you maybe open up a way that you might not have seen for yourself. But ultimately, you're going to come back to your why. This is why I'm doing it. But I actually think, to be honest, getting it in your mind first that this is your path and this is your alignment is actually really, really useful, because as well you start to come up against your own self in certain ways, you know. So for example, you'll come up with your own challenge, and business always will draw your challenges out of you. It'll draw the parts of you out of you that you feel vulnerable, that you feel weak, where you feel like not good enough. All of that is kind of like really good teasing ground when you start a business, because it really will tease those things out of you. And really coming back to this is about your alignment really makes sense in the midst of all of that, because you can then start to see how you're going to move forward from that, as opposed to actually looking at someone to give you your life path, or to show you your life path, or to, open the path up for you. Basically, you're continuously creating that path.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And as we've learned, it can change, because I think a lot of people think that once they start a business, they have to stay in that business because they've chosen it. But in reality, as we're growing, our business can also grow with us.
This is true. And I think to a large extent, one thing always leads to another. So, for example, I started off in media advertising, and when I look at the person that I was when I was doing media advertising and the person that I am now, very, very different in terms of like the outward output of what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But basically, everything that happened with the media advertising has actually completely informed where I am now, because it's allowed me to actually see business on a deeper level. So even though I'm quite heartfelt, there is an element of quite a strong, solid business mind at the back of it as well. It's kind of, this has to have sustainability, this has to make sense in the real world. So that's allowed me to actually bring what could be a very esoteric, very out there subject into kind of like an everyday sort of recognizable way for people to digest. Mm-hmm. So it was really important for me to go through that path. And I think basically when you've got a business, you might start off doing something and that resonance will give you something, it'll give you an experience that will actually, when you move on to whatever it is that you're being drawn to, you're going to take that experience with you. So I think basically having empathy and compassion for yourself in the midst of business is so important as well, because people can so judge themselves.
Yes.
So, it's kind of like basically they judge their resonance as wrong. So, it's they're in one thing and it's building, but it's not feeling quite right. And whereas it might have started off as the right fit, suddenly it's not fitting anymore. And then people start to fool themselves because it's kind of like it looks really uncomfortable to actually acknowledge it. And then once people sometimes, not everyone, but sometimes once people actually acknowledge that, this isn't really fitting, then there's a whole load of judgment that they pile onto themselves of like, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this again. Like, I can't believe I'm moving, or, I can't stick to stuff and all of this sort of thing. And really, it's just basically having the compassion and empathy to acknowledge and say, okay, well, this is where my next expansion step is. This is where I'm being drawn to next. This is where life is taking me next, and really open yourself to that.
I know one thing that I've really struggled with when my business has gone through a big transition is, what will people think? They'll think I'm not serious. I've been doing this thing for so long, and then I'm changing to something else, and then I'm changing to something else, and they're just going to think I'm wishy-washy. They're going to think, I'm just not taking things seriously. I'm doing just another new thing. How do you recommend that people deal with that? Because that can be very challenging.
I think integrity in terms of execution is always really important. So, for example, whatever business that you're in, when you're giving 100% to it and you're putting your best into it, then there's an element of you, when you start to feel the resonance moving, you actually have integrity with how you move, Yes. So you don't leave gaping holes and big gaps in the movement, unless obviously some chaotic thing has happened and, that's what's happened. But, and in the midst of, if that's what happened, then not judging yourself for it. But generally speaking, there can be shifts that you make where you feel your resonance moving in a direction, and you make that shift with your integrity aligned. And I think, this, to a large extent with business, the people that actually really are the ones that are the forerunners, let's say, and the ones that are actually creating innovations and being pioneers and sort of really expanding things outwards, are the ones that are actually not paying too much attention to what everybody else is thinking, because everybody wants to feel comfortable with you as they know you. And so you can actually then sort of completely box yourself in order to be comfortable for them and their comfort. Whereas if you actually redefine yourself, and you redefine yourself with alignment and empowerment, people have no choice but to actually accept the new person that's emerging out of you, because they have no choice. Because that's what you're doing, right?
Exactly. And it's also a much more coherent kind of transition.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for women who are really struggling to connect with their heart and their natural resonance, what would you recommend that they do to get in touch with themselves?
One of the things I always say to people is to find your rhythm. And in order to find your, and two things, to find your rhythm and to find your voice. And to be really playful with that process. So for me, for example, what works really well for me is Kundalini yoga, for starters. So I always will come back to Kundalini yoga, come back to movement. And in the movement, you actually feel your own body, and you feel where your resistance is, and you actually allow yourself to release resistance. And sometimes releasing resistance from the body can actually release resistance in the mind that you weren't even in touch with, which is beautiful, because you don't really need a narrative then. You just allow that release to happen. But finding your way, finding the way that works for you in terms of moving, and in terms of, for some people it could be walking and just finding their rhythm in their walk. It could be running and finding that. Dancing is a huge one for me as well, because I think with dancing, you definitely feel your rhythm then.
Your lack of rhythm.
And even if you're kind of like, dance isn't, you're not the most amazingly graceful dancer on the dance floor. It doesn't matter. It's more about actually really contacting your own rhythm, contacting the way you move within your body. So that's one thing. The voice element, I think, is hugely important. The way you speak, different tones that you use. So for me, singing, one of the reasons why I love Kundalini Yoga, for example, is there's three elements to it. There's a meditative element where you actually get really silent and get really still and kind of come back to your own resonance. Mm-hmm. There's a movement element where you actually then feel your body and feel what's going on in terms of your physical, blood and bones and flesh sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's the mantra that you do, which is kind of like a repetitive sound that you make. But these three elements actually really bring you to yourself on all levels. And I think basically that's what I'm getting at is basically playing around with different things, whether it be singing, whether it be doing, speeches, whether it be maybe getting into comedy or something like that, that allows you to actually play with your voice and really get a sense of where your voice is. And then also the final thing is meditation or stillness or quietness, whatever works for you. Mm-hmm. Some people are actually really comfortable with the idea of meditating. Other people find it irritating. So taking a walk in nature could work really well for them. But whatever comes, for you as your resonance to kind of get that element of stillness and connection back to the core of yourself is really important. So that's basically what I would say, because once you actually get a sense of your rhythm, once you get a sense of your voice, and once that you get a sense of your own resonance, and your rhythm comes from movement, your voice comes from playing around with your tone, and your resonance comes from stillness and recognizing and noticing, then you can start to actually really interact with it in the world. And bringing that to your business is profound, basically.
Definitely. So once a woman has gotten in touch with this, she's gotten in touch with her rhythm, her voice, her resonance, and she's aligned with her heart, how then can she go about visualizing her path in business?
Well, I tend to take women through the chakra system. So I tend to, and the reason why I go through the chakra system is because every element of your expression is in the chakras in one way or another. And it starts from purely physical, where, it's really the resources and the nuts and the bolts and the materials and what, how this thing is going to look in the outside world. And then you move all the way up to the universal, where you're actually in touch with your higher self and you're in touch with your own divinity and really getting the inspiration and the ideas through. And I think actually working through in that way works really well in terms of the work that I do with people. But if women are doing this on their own, I think basically getting that sense of whatever it is that you call that part of yourself, whether it be a higher self, whether it be your divine, whatever it is that you call that part of yourself. But I think bringing that into basically what you're visualizing is really, really good, because it starts to open the mind up to the more universal rather than contained in the very small, confines of what you think might be possible for you. And it opens up possibilities for you. And also connecting with the heart, basically. So really the love of what you're doing, bringing the love of what you're doing into the work is really important if you're working from a heartfelt place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So, Tosh, do you have any women business mentors? Are there any women in business who inspire you and who have helped you on your business journey?
I can think of three that have been a real sort of game changers for me. Marie Forleo, I think, has been exceptional in terms of showing women a path to coaching that previously wasn't there so much, because basically the path to coaching for a while was looking very much down the NLP line, and it was very, very alpha, very masculine. Whereas she showed a path of a soft femininity, but also an alignment to the earth, an alignment to kind of like, bringing solid material aspect into it, it's kind of making business, quite solid. So she was really, really a huge game changer for me. And in terms of actually getting a sense of that online space and how one maneuvers around the online space, she was really a huge pioneer for me in that way. Another person who recently I came to their work is Carrie Ann Moss, who has got Anna Pinner Living, the website. But I absolutely adore how heartfelt she is. She's so incredibly connected to the integrity of spirit, is what I would say. She's so, and really bringing that divine feminine, that goddess feminine, but also actually recognizing that we live in a nuts and bolts everyday life as well. So, bringing in, the fact that being a mother, for example, can be hard work, or, there's mundane things that you have to do, and how do you bring the sacred in the midst of all of that? So, and I love the beauty of her website as well. I mean, basically, I've used that website as my muse in so many different ways. And then the last person is Leonie Dawson.
Oh, yes.
Who, I mean, she's just like exceptional. If you're sort of got any doubts about accepting yourself, just as you are, how you are, just as you show up, then really interact with Leonie Dawson, because she is just basically, I'm human and I'm divine. And you're going to see every part of me. And I don't disguise it. I don't pretty it. I just make it as it is. I just show you who I am. But on top of that, she's such an amazing artist. And what she brings to the business arena in terms of her artwork and how she merges her art with business, I think is really beautiful. So those would be my three.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, Tosh, how can other women in business benefit from working with you?
Well, basically, for me, I actually work with women in terms of aligning them and getting clarity in terms of their path. That's one way. But also in terms of actually really expanding forward and really getting a take as to how they can actually dream that impossible dream and make it a reality. How they can take those visions that they have in their mind that, might be a bit daunting for them, or just basically they can't see the way forward with it, and actually make it a solid reality so they're actually interacting with it here, in the here and now sort of thing. So that's basically where the work comes in. And I work very much with the energy with that, because I think everything starts vibrationally. And once you can get the vision and you can get your own resonance and you're actually empowered in the way that you're going forward, then everything actually leads from there. And it might not be the easiest. There might be challenges in the midst of it, but your alignment to your own empowerment will ensure that you crack through those challenges. So that's basically what I work with women. I actually act as a mentor. I also hold a space for success for people and really bring them back to what it is that they were, hold them accountable basically to what it is that they said that they were wanting or going for. And is that still resonating? Because that could be changing, that could, and really to honor that. Honor where their resonance is, basically.
Excellent. And you have different coaching packages and programs. Could you tell us a little bit about what you have to offer people?
Well, I actually have a 3-month and a 6-month coaching package. And basically, the reason why I do a longer term coaching package is that, generally speaking, if we're going, if someone's moving in a particular direction, a lot of times we experience what I call the pendulum swing in terms of what we're heading for. And you might go to one session with someone, for example, and feel really expanded and really, forward moving and empowered, and, you're aligned and you're going for what you're doing. And then basically you get into your own sort of like four walls, or you get into interacting with the world, and then something comes and triggers you, and it triggers that element of you that takes you back to that sort of level of disempowerment, or that level of, I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing, or all that kind of stuff. And so having someone who actually holds that level of, that level of empowerment, but that level of success for you for a longer period of time works really well, because it ensures that you're continuously moving forward, and you're continuously moving forward with your empowerment in line. So those are the two packages that I have. I do what I call an intuitive wisdom session with women, and that's really focused on getting people aligned to their own intuition and really playing with the metaphors with the mind and playing with the subconscious mind to open out the visions that they might have in terms of where they want to go with their business, what they want to do next, and where their resonance is taking them, and what pictures that resonance might be coming up with. So working with women and their intuition in that way is something that I do, and those are hourly and 90-minute packages. And then I've got something coming up now called a Sacred Divine Connection, which is basically 49 days it's an e-course, and it's 49 days of connecting women to their inner goddess. And this package, I've basically made it really affordable, but also what you're going to be getting is something that's actually really quite beautiful as well. But it brings you into your own intuition, it brings you into your own alignment, and it's something that you're experiencing and doing, every day for yourself. And alongside that, I'm going to have a group on Facebook that mirrors what's going on within those 49 days. So those are the three things that I have to offer people at the moment.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Tosh, where can people find you online so they can check you out?
Basically, my website is tashmitch.com, so it's TASHMITCH.com, and all my Facebook links, LinkedIn links, everything else is there. So if people go to that website, I've also got a project called the Art of Life Project, which is basically my blog, but it's where I talk to people about artists, innovators, people in business, about what it means to make their life a work of art and what it means to make their life a masterpiece, basically. So going and interacting with that is always an expansive experience for a lot of people.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Holly.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. And remember to visit readytobloom.com/113 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ready to Bloom podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's guests, including links for topics that were discussed at readytobloom.com. That's ready, 2, bloom.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave us a quick review of this podcast. Thank you so much.